Welcome back to Now and Then. We've got a handful of stories that have caught our attention this month, and they're coming from very different corners of the industry. We're talking about advocacy, retail, product trends, and regulations, including the launch of CHFA's red tape reduction campaign, what we're seeing out at the Summer Fancy Food Show, Costco's beauty strategy, and a new piece of guidance that could signal where plant-based foods labeling is headed next. So let's dive in. We're going to start with advocacy because this is something we've been working on for quite a while behind the scenes. CHFA has officially launched our red tape reduction campaign. Before we get into the details, we're joined by our VP of Regulatory Affairs and Government Relations, Sonia Parmar. Thanks for joining us, Sonia.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we love having guests. So I want to start by having you explain to us, why did now feel like the right time for this campaign?
Right now feels like the right time because there has been advocacy work that has gone on for the last 3 years. But I would say just with all of the changes that have happened, including an election, promises throughout an election, and now continued changes that we're seeing from the Government of Canada that have really been showing more of an increase than a decrease in red tape. And so fundamentally, this is a really important time now, especially as we have consultations coming out and rolling, one after the other, that this makes it the ideal time for us to launch this campaign on red tape reduction.
And like you said, there has been quite a few consultations coming out. And this campaign, it isn't really about one regulation. It's about that cumulative burden that's facing our industry. So can you talk a little bit about what we're hearing from members?
What we're hearing from members is primarily that they have not been feeling a reduction in red tape. Although there have been a lot of discussions with the Government of Canada, we're not exactly clear on the final details. So we know that they want to make impacts to labeling regulations to make them more flexible. They actually want to also create class 1s as registrations, but those final details haven't been shared. So in the meanwhile, what we're seeing is a lot of delays with respect to approvals. Pathways to licensing and to marketing have been painful in the past. And so a lot of members are just giving their examples. A prime one that we received recently was a company that launched both in the States and in Canada. They had 15 products go to market in the States, and these are now being supplied to Major League Baseball teams. It is being supplied to battalions. And yet in Canada, 13 out of those 15 same products are still in review. And so you can see the stark difference between the pathways to market in the United States versus in Canada.
I think something that stands out about this campaign is that it seems to be grounded more in data than just anecdotal. I'm wondering, Sonia, if you can share with our audience the types of industry stories that are kind of helping to shape the campaign.
Sure. So I think there are many stories that are helping shape the campaign. I just gave an example of one of them, but I would say as well, just stories around even the resources that it takes for companies to actually staff according to what the work that they have to put in for Canada. So just as an example, we have one large company that has said that they need 10 employees just to manage their Canadian submissions versus 1 employee in the States or 3 employees for Australia. And so a lot of people are just giving examples of their day-to-day operational frustrations that they face. And that's really where red tape is felt most predominantly. It's on the ground. It's everyday interactions with the department.
So I know one thing we talk about a lot is competitiveness. And what are the top 3 things, in your opinion, that are impacting how competitive a Canadian company can be? I think you already gave an example with just staffing, but is there anything else that really impacts our competitiveness?
Yes, I would say probably the top 3 things now that would impact it. One is just the cumulative cost of regulation. So to comply with regulation is very expensive. So just, the full out cost that they need to follow the rules. Second, I would say regulatory uncertainty. So not knowing necessarily because you're waiting for an application, you're waiting for a submission, you don't know exactly when you're going to be able to actually launch your product. That can have a huge impact on competitiveness. And then I would say it's the competition with international competitiveness. So for example, when We have neighbors to the south that, pretty much go straight to market. It's very hard to compete with that kind of framework when we have, very long time frames before we can actually make it to market. There's a huge impact on innovation.
And I think that's one thing too, when you say international, Canadians can access those products, right? So you can, okay, yeah.
And in understanding, I guess, what's impacting how competitive these Canadian businesses can be, or I guess what's impacting their competitiveness would probably help shape and help us understand what we need to go to Health Canada and ask for. So maybe if you can kind of put it in plain language for our audience, what are the three things that CHFA is asking Health Canada for?
I would say the primary things that we're asking for, well, number one is a fair regulatory system, because we have been asking for that, for a number of years, especially when the self-care framework discussions began, which is really the stem of all of this, regulatory reform that we've seen over the last 10 years, literally more than 10 years. So to work with Health Canada to get a fair set of regulations is number one. I would say number two, we're asking for them not to work in silos. They actually need to work together. They need to be competitive in terms of, the pathways to market. And they need to look at how much this is impacting companies, not just, rule by rule, but all together. What does that big picture look like for this industry? And then I would say number three, we're just asking for proper actual stakeholder consultations to go through, because much of the problems that could be avoided is through proper consultation. So these are really the fundamental basics that we've been working on. These are things that would impact absolutely everything that we're discussing from a red tape perspective. And when we talk about that, that also means operationally. Much of the red tape that I've mentioned, it's not the rules themselves. It's how the government actually interprets the rules that causes a lot of the red tape. And so if you're having those discussions and those proper stakeholder interactions, you will understand where the frictions occur. I can't really say there's a single file necessarily. I mean, there's many files cumulatively. And so we've had to ask for very broad asks in that case, because otherwise, we're going to be asking every day for an individual issue to be resolved, when really it is a broader kind of cultural issue that we're asking them to adjust.
Okay, so I guess to summarize, we have it all seems very reasonable, fair, looking for big picture, and kind of along with that collaboration as well. And then that collaboration really goes into the stakeholder engagement as well.
Exactly.
So I guess finally, if there were one item that members could do to support these efforts, what would it be?
I would say to contact their members of parliament with personal letters about how their businesses are impacted by red tape. We can't stress that enough. We've done postcard campaigns, we've sent form letters, but there's nothing that replaces a personal interaction with your member of parliament to share your personal experiences and stories so that they truly understand what you are going through. Invite them to your facilities, invite them to your stores. Just let them be part of the process and understand exactly what you're going through. And it really can go a long way in getting champions to fight for you in and on Parliament Hill.
Yeah, we've seen it through some of the past campaigns we've done, but those personal stories about the impact to business, the impacts to jobs in various ridings across the country, it really does change how government thinks about it. So great call out there. Well, this is a big campaign. We've got a lot of content coming out, assets to help our members as well. So thanks for coming on and kind of giving us the initial breakdown. It's definitely something we'll be revisiting over the coming months as more pieces of the campaign roll out. And we'd love to have you back on for some updates in the fall if you're cool with that.
Thank you so much. I will be back.
Thanks, Sonia.
Thank you.
So we're going to move on to our next guest, Jules Gorham, who is our Senior Director of Regulatory Affairs and Quebec Relations and former guest on the pod. And we wanted to invite Jules into the studio because there was some interesting news recently out of La Belle Province. My French is going to be terrible, Jules, so we're going to have to bear with me here. But,
Nailed it.
Yeah. The Quebec government, though, they recently announced a renewed investment, and this is where my French is going to be bad, so I apologize, in its program Alimentation Santé. You can probably correct that later, but aimed at helping food manufacturers improve the nutritional quality of processed foods. And at first glance, it sounds like a public health initiative, but I think there's a lot more to it for businesses. And so can you give us a really high level overview of what was announced?
Yeah, definitely. First of all, thank you for having me back on the pod. It's amazing to be back. But yeah, very exciting news coming out of Quebec, I think last Friday already. The Quebec government continues to show its leadership for, innovation in the sector, in the food sector. And in a nutshell, the Minister of Agriculture, so better known as MAPAC, renewed its healthy food program when we translate it. You did it great, Lindsay. If we translate it, it's their healthy food program until 2029. So the objective of that program is to increase the number of nutritious processed foods, foods with improved nutritional value, and health promoting foods. As they list them out. So it's very exciting. They want to increase the number of healthy foods available to consumers in Quebec, mainly through funding. So Quebec food processors are able to get funding to develop or reformulate products that are healthier while reducing the use of certain food additives. In a nutshell, that's what it's doing.
Okay, so it's open to food processors for reformulation or new products. Can you tell us a little bit more about like who specifically is eligible and what kinds of projects the government's hoping to encourage through this program?
Yeah, definitely. So they have pretty clear definitions of what they consider to be like nutritious food. Those are available on the website. Of course, basic requirement is that you're a registered business in Quebec. So for anyone listening to us out of the province, you cannot have access to this, but that's kind of the basic requirement. And there's other ones depending on which stream. So they've divided by 3 streams. To answer your question, Ashley, so the first one is diagnostic studies is how they're calling the first stream, and that provides that available funding to hire outside experts to identify an opportunity to create a healthier food, improve the nutritional value of your food, develop a health promoting food, or reduce or eliminate food additives. So that stream 1 is before you have a product. So it's investing in product development. And then the second stream, as they have it, is product development and reformulation. Kind of self-explanatory in that one. You can develop a new product. That's also available for beverages. And then there's reformulation of products, which is very interesting. And then the third stream is sector-wide strategic projects. So that's for organizations who carry out, initiatives to benefit the food industry in this, healthy food aspect. So pretty much, you got those 3 streams to choose from, and they opened up stream 1 and 2 first, and stream 3 is opening up for applications just a little bit later.
Sounds all very exciting. So it's
It
very
is.
much aligned with, CHFA members or the natural, organic, and wellness industry in general might already have done reformulation or have products that are free from those additives that this program is looking at. So I guess maybe the new product launches to get funding for that would be great, but maybe there's something else that's a good opportunity for our Quebec members already in the space. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that. But I'm also curious if this is something that's just for established companies or if emerging brands can look at this. Is it for both? If you can tell us a little bit more about that.
For every and everyone. I think it's first of all, I think it's great for the brands already in our space, walk around our show floor, look at, the many Quebec brands that are there. I think this is great for them. And I'll get into that in a minute. But I also think it's great to bring new people to the space. We know from the reports that Lindsay has put out, consumers are looking for healthier, better for them foods. There's eyes on wellness right now. We all want to live a bit better. We know here in Quebec, especially, consumers very much put emphasis on buying local. So I think this is an opportunity for perhaps local brands who haven't really come out and explore the natural organic wellness space to come into that space. If they don't have a product offering, but they want to get it right, to get funding, to work with experts in the space, to launch a product that is actually beneficial for people. So I think it can bring new people into our space. So, hopefully over the next few years, we can see Quebec grow and see more brands at our shows. But it's also for the established brands who want to reformat, who want to get involved in reformulation, whether it's to modernize a product that they might already offer. You don't always, if you have something that's selling well, you might not always want to just change it because change is hard for people, but you might just want to reformulate it, reduce some of that sodium, reduce the sugar, maybe reduce some of the fat in it, increase the fiber is a big thing as we talk about GLP-1s as well. So I think it's good for those who are looking at our space and want to come and be friends with us. And I think it's really good for those who are already in the space and want to probably embark on a reformulation. They can get some funding to do that. So I think it's good for everybody. I think it's win-win for everybody in the industry.
Awesome. The more the merrier.
More the merrier. That's what I was going to ask you, but you touched on it already. I mean, I think it is exciting that we can see brands that potentially who are not in our space look at their product offering, understand where the consumer is going, and hopefully just provide Canadians, well, specifically Quebecers, but hopefully take it to rest of Canada with just better for you options. Because there is a lot, I think, established companies can do to reformulate to kind of meet the changing demands that consumers have with their food preferences. And so it's really exciting to know that whether you are that bigger established brand or you're small and emerging and have this great idea, that you can hopefully, like I said, reformulate and just meet people where they are.
Yeah, I think it's great. And I think, I was kind of thinking about it last night, getting ready for the pod and everything. And I was thinking about, Quebec government must be listening to Lindsay. They must be reading the reports. Maybe, they're coming out to the shows and they're saying, but I think it's a great initiative. I think the timing, it's a renewal of a program. So it's good that they see that there's still a need for this program. And I invite people to apply for it because if there's demand, then we could get it back and extend it again in 2029. But, everything we could touch on front of pack, right? Like reformulations, front of pack. If you want to avoid la loupe, like we call it, in French, like you might need to reduce that sodium. You might need to reduce some sugar. Added fiber is also included in this. So I think it's really great for brands in our space who are, redid their packaging and see that they have la loupe and they might want to just kind of maybe get rid of it. But I also think it's great. Lindsay, you speak often lately about the impact of GLP-1. And I don't think the Quebec government is jumping on a GLP-1 friendly bandwagon in any sense of the word. But we know that people are looking to have increased fiber in their food. We're eating a lot more protein. Nothing on this is to add protein to your food. I will say that right now, but there is to increase fiber. So for everyone who's looking for higher fiber in their products, this is a chance to reformulate and add some fiber to your product. And we know that that's what, the consumers are looking for today. So I think it's interesting to see this kind of modernization approach coming out of the government. And it's not a little bit of money. Like you can, depending on the stream, it's up to 70%. I think the maximum for your project is $100,000. Like if you're reformulating or developing a product like that can be very helpful. So definitely I think it's exciting news. And I think it's great to see that the Quebec government being leaders in the space, knowing what consumers are looking for and wanting to keep people buying local. They have to help local food producers, kind of meet those demands and meet the public where they are.
It's an awesome program. It sounds like an awesome program. So thanks for telling us all about it. You've touched on a lot of pieces of advice for Quebec members already. If there's one thing that you want to come across that you haven't mentioned yet, or maybe where members can go to learn more about this, if you can let us know.
I think the important thing for CHFA members, no one from the government's going to knock on your business door on a Monday morning and say like, hey, do you want funding for this? You got to go and get it. you have to apply. It's been renewed until 2029. I can't believe we're even talking 2029, but here we are. It's 2029 or until the money runs out. So it's not a first come, first serve. There's enough to go around, but at the same time, don't delay. Look at the information. It's all available on the Quebec government website. So that would be quebec.ca. It's on the MAPAC website as well. CHFA posted about it on LinkedIn. So you can, jump on LinkedIn, go on CHFA's page, and you'll see it there in our French post as well. I reposted it as well. So we want the information to be accessible for our members, but go check it out. See if this is something that, you meet the criteria. It's not a long list of criteria. And then if it's interesting to you and it's something that could benefit your business and, help you put a healthier product out on the shelves for consumers, then I would say just don't wait, because it is until funding is exhausted. So there's always that little thing to take into consideration. But yeah, we've posted it everywhere, Ashley, so hopefully they can go and find it. And I know for our members in Quebec, en français, it went out, I believe, in the member email as well. So if you receive your emails from CHFA in French, you'll have that in your inbox.
And correct me if I'm wrong, is MAPAC coming to our show?
They are. Yeah. So you
Yeah.
can ask all your questions. MAPAC's coming to the show. We're co-hosting a French pitching session with them. And they're going to be on the trade show floor as well with the Groupe Export and the brands that are coming out with Groupe Export. So MAPAC will be at CHFA Now Toronto. So perfect people to ask questions to if you've kind of dug into this and want to know things. Then yes, they'll be there to help you out. And if you have any trouble, reach out to me. I'm happy to point people in the right direction.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much, Jules, for coming on. We always appreciate you keeping us up to date on regional activities. And we'll certainly be watching how this relationship evolves, and we'll have you back on the pod for more updates as they come available.
I would love that very much. Thank you both so much. It was lovely to be here, and I'll skip out and let you ladies get to the other affairs of the day. But thanks for having me. And yeah, I'll keep you updated on how this rolls out in Quebec.
Awesome.
Take care.
Bon jeudi.
Bon jeudi, oui. Merci.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, so Ashley, we have been to Ottawa. We have been to Quebec. Let's switch gears and go to New York City.
All right.
Different place. So the Summer Fancy Food Show is always one of the events that kind of gives us that early look at where specialty food is headed. And this year's show really reinforced some things that we've been talking about for a while. Consumers still want products that support wellness, but they also want flavor, they want convenience, and they want discovery.
And what were the big trends that stood out for you?
Yeah, I think there was a few themes that I saw come. And again, this is me just following it from afar. I unfortunately didn't get the chance to go, but I will say what I saw from some of the coverage is none of the trends, if you will, were necessarily new. But they were interesting to see them continue to play out given all the research and the forecasting that we pay attention to at CHFA. So I'm going to feel like a broken record. You probably guessed this one, but protein continues to be everywhere, and it continues to evolve beyond those shakes and those bars and really showing up in snacks and bakery and in everyday foods. So really people continuing to keep that protein maxing vibe alive and well. Consumers are looking for it in everything, so people continue to respond. Another one that I think is really interesting is global flavors continue to gain momentum, but they're also being paired in familiar formats that make them more approachable. And one region that actually specifically that we've been watching the rise in is Chinese cuisine and flavors. And that was something that definitely showed up at the Fancy Food Show, it seemed like. And then another trend, I would say, kind of rapid firing through these, but another trend I would say that, again, that we've been talking about for a while now is around consumers' increased desire for trust and transparency. Small plug, our report finally launched this week, so you can check that out if you're a member. But definitely a noticeable emphasis on ingredient transparency and cleaner labels. So again, really interesting just having that conversation with Jules, right? Like we're seeing more and more consumers demand it. And again, looking at some of the coverage, it seemed that it wasn't necessarily fewer ingredients, but ingredients that consumers could recognize. I think that's really important. People want to have that confidence that they know what's in their food. And then lastly, I think one trend that I thought was particularly interesting, and again, it's something we've been paying attention to at CHFA, is called that elevated everyday. I think you and I probably talked about this last year on the pod now, right? So these pantry staples and just taking them up a notch, making them feel special, making them feel premium. And I really think that comes back to this affordability piece. Maybe people aren't going out as much, but they're really treating themselves to something that really feels special. So Anyway, like I said at the beginning, none of these necessarily felt new, but I thought it was really interesting to see how consistently they're showing up across different shows, across our consumer research, across the forecasting that we're even seeing as we go into 2027 and 2028. And I think this, kind of tells us that these things are no longer becoming trends. They're just these bigger shifts in what consumers expect from the foods and the products they bring into their home.
It's interesting. So we'll keep an eye on these. I don't know if I should call them trends anymore. We'll keep an eye on the. I'm going to call it trends. We'll keep an eye on these trends. I think will be interesting to see what shows up at our show in September at CHFA Now.
Totally. Okay. Another story that I thought was really interesting that caught my attention. It actually came from a publication called Beauty Matter, and it was looking at Costco's growing influence on beauty. And I feel like I'm actually in the minority of people here because I don't have a Costco membership. So I was actually really interested to see that this was, something people were going to Costco for.
This is the first time hearing of it. So is it like Sephora aisle type style at Costco, or what does this look like?
That would be amazing. All of a sudden, you've got perfect lighting at Costco. No, actually, instead, from the story that I read, they're doing something different, and I think it's actually quite smart. It's a really interesting strategy because Costco isn't trying to compete with Sephora or even special beauty retailers specifically on assortment. What they're doing is they're curating a relatively small assortment of highly trusted brands that are really creating excitement through limited availability and like really delivering on kind of an exceptional customer experience or exceptional value. And so it was being framed almost like this treasure hunt for beauty. And I think what I really found interesting about this article was it's how much Costco understands their shopper and was able to tap into this. From the article, learning that Costco members are incredibly loyal. They're actually typically higher income households, and they have significant purchasing power. And so they're willing to spend the money on premium products. And they want to feel like they've made smart purchases. They're not necessarily looking for discounts per se.
Right. Yeah, I can see that. I mean, value doesn't always mean cheaper.
Yeah.
So that would be the same for a Costco shopper as well. It's probably about the quality or even that trust piece that, keeps showing up over many of our conversations. And I think one part of it is probably feeling like you're getting good value for your money, right? Not that it's inexpensive, but that the value of the dollar is there. So yeah, I can see premium beauty brands being sold at Costco, kind of alongside all the other essentials.
Yeah, your one-stop shop, I guess. But I think for retailers, this is a really good reminder that, retail strategy isn't always about having the biggest assortment. Sometimes it can really just be about creating confidence with consumers, carefully selecting those products, that like curated assortment, if you will, and really making every item feel kind of worth the discovery. So just another example of how value continues to mean more to consumers than just price alone. And I think consumers who are looking for trusted brands, quality products, and a shopping experience, like they want it to feel worthwhile. And I think that's where Costco seems to be winning here. They're delivering on that. Okay, so we've been to my worlds, which I love, of trends and beauty. Want to talk more, I guess, your world? Not that I know you like those things too, but you're more educated on some of these things than me. So let's flip into maybe some tariff conversation, if we will, some trade conversation.
So I think it was last podcast we discussed the Kuzma review. That was announced, and now we're on to more trade conversation. So
that was then, this is now. Like the podcast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the U.S. announced an additional 50% tariff on a range of Canadian products, and they're doing this using the Section 338 of the Tariffs Act. So this is different than the other tariffs that were kind of like the fentanyl tariffs. From my understanding, this Section 338 of the Tariffs Act hasn't been used in like many, many decades, but the U.S. is using it under concerns that Canada is unfairly treating their U.S. alcohol and dairy and vehicles in comparison to how they treat other foreign countries' similar products. So as it's been announced, these new tariffs are scheduled to take effect on August 19th. But we know that these conversations are always ongoing and they seem to change very rapidly. So, at the time we're recording this episode, these are the facts. We don't know if that will change before our episode is launched, but we do know that the conversations will be ongoing between Canada and the US, and that there's an important difference between these tariffs and the previous tariffs. So these tariffs are not exempt from the CUSMA compliant goods, similar to the previous tariffs. The 50% tariff will also be added to other applicable duties and charges. So products already subject to the Section 232 tariffs will not be included in this, but there are a number of impacted food products that will.
Yeah. We sent out a member bulletin earlier this week, and I was shocked at the number of categories, if you will, that are impacted. So I guess, where do you think that CHFA members will feel the greatest impact?
Yeah, there's a list of dairy products, and it goes well beyond like cheese. It includes, certain milk powders and whey protein concentrates and milk protein ingredients. So I think that area might have a big impact on our members. Also, non-alcoholic beer is included in this list. So any of our non-alcoholic beer members that are exporting to the US, I would say that all businesses should check their tariff classifications rather than assuming there are only certain products included, because even the traditional dairy products and alcoholic beverages aren't really captured in any sort of logical way in these lists. So I do encourage people to review all of the annexes carefully, because there are products of relevance to the food sector in all three proclamations. So do go and take a look.
A lot there, but like you said, the last episode we talked about the CUSMA review. So how does this all connect back to what's happening there currently?
I mean, the two aren't linked legally, but I think the timing is suspect. These tariffs come not long after the U.S. announced at the beginning of July that it wasn't extending CUSMA for another 16-year term. So right now, the CUSMA agreement remains in force, but there are annual reviews. There's negotiations that are going on right now. And I think this 30-day period from when the tariffs were announced to when they come into force on August 19th, obviously these tariffs can be used as a negotiation tool. So I just think it's the timing is a little bit suspect for businesses, though that will be immediately impacted. I would say that this is the time to get involved. I know Sonia mentioned it earlier about contacting your MP, but there are other ways to get involved and let the impacts to your business be known as well. And right now, the Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada is doing a roundtable on this topic. They want to hear about the impacts to your business, and they're also interested to hear as well about what impacts any potential retaliatory tariffs would have on your businesses as well, especially with regards to the time sensitivity of this August 19th deadline.
Yeah. I mean, again, we say it so much on this podcast, don't be passive about this. Those stories on how things like this impact your business from that first person narrative are huge. Okay. There was definitely a lot there, but that's on the trade side. But there actually is some stuff on the regulatory side. And the big one that I wanted to ask you about is CFIA has released new guidance around the labeling of plant-based alternatives to egg products. I hope I said that right. So I wanted to hear from you what that means and what that means for our members.
Yeah, so I would say at first glance, alternatives to eggs, it might feel small, like it has a fairly small impact to our members, but it is worth our attention because it's the first publication of guidance that addresses plant-based categories. So, we hope that milk and meat alternatives will follow suit in hopefully short order. The guidance was actually a long time in the making. The consultation was first released I believe it was 2 years ago. And it was the year before that CHFA actually had joined forces with other industry groups on a direct advocacy for labeling of plant-based alternatives. So that's 3 years coming now. Feels like it's been a long wait. But I would say that, there is some noteworthiness for the general industry. It is less about egg alternative guidance and more about what it signals. I believe it's setting a precedent that will be easier to replicate for other alternatives like milk and meat.
So what would guidance in this area, what would it actually do?
So guidance doesn't really create new regulations. What it does is gives an interpretation and explains how the rules on food labeling can apply to plant-based alternatives. So it was previously understood that you couldn't use terms like eggs and milk and chicken for products that were made from plants or like a plant-based alternative. So often, you would see like, almond milk. Well, technically that name milk wasn't supposed to be used, even though many companies used it as a way to describe their product and get across to consumers what the use of the product was. So there were some lawsuits, there were concerns, but now, so this is actually, we're not talking about milk, we're talking about egg, but if it were to follow for milk and meat, it would be a big step in the ability for companies to be able to indicate in familiar terms what the product is. Like, so now companies can use terms associated with eggs like omelet or scramble, or they can say liquid egg product. The one part that really matters is it's provided. So the caveat is it's provided that the overall impression of the product isn't misleading and that the product clearly identifies as a plant-based alternative or identifies by its like primary ingredient, like soy protein omelet or something like that, or soybean protein liquid egg product. Like it ends up getting kind of long sometimes, but at least it is a step in the right direction, and the focus is on ensuring that consumers understand, I guess, what the true nature of the product is, while also allowing companies to communicate that intended use. So CHFA had actually participated in the consultation, and we're pleased to see that like several themes from our submission were actually reflected in the final guidance. So that's always good to see. And, hopefully as they continue to develop clear guidance for more plant-based alternatives, it will benefit, I would say, both consumer understanding and the industry ability to market their products as well.
So interesting. And it is a significant shift from the previously restrictive view where it came, like you said, to using those traditional food names for plant-based food products. So having a guidance that recognizes how consumers actually understand these products is, I think, incredibly meaningful step for brands to be able, like you said, to communicate what this product is, even if it's just the beginning. So I guess if I'm hearing you right, if you're developing products in these categories, it's really worth staying on top of these changes because they could influence packaging, marketing, and consumer communication in pretty short order.
Yeah, that's right. So we have eggs right now, and just like anything else we talk about on podcasts, we'll continue to keep you updated as more news comes through on hopefully more plant-based alternatives.
Other than maybe the tariffs when we're then and now. Most times we'll try to be now and then. Awesome. Okay, so that's a lot for this month. We went all over the map. We went to different places. So if you are following the red tape reduction campaign, keep an eye on your inbox over the coming weeks. We've got a number of new resources and stories coming your way that I think will help keep people informed. And if there's a trend or policy issue that you'd like us to unpack in a future episode, we always love to hear from you. Thanks, Ashley, for all your insights. And thanks to everyone listening. We'll see you next month on Now and Then.